The story begins in a classroom filled with anxious students. There was a fat teacher yelling at them to hurry up with their exams, everyone sweating bullets and thinking of ways to cheat their way through the paper. Suddenly, one guy had a brilliant idea. He remembered that Lin Tian had promised to give them all the answers. But when they looked over to him, they found him snoring away in class. Meanwhile, our protagonist, Lin Tian, was taking a leisurely stroll to the cafeteria for yet another round of rice bowls. The lady at the counter was getting increasingly annoyed with him as it was already his sixth bowl that day. She asked him if he wanted something else, but he shouted back that he was broke. The other students who were there started whispering amongst themselves about how cheap Tian could be. Little did they know, Tian was listening in and promptly declared how good-looking he was and how stylish his plastic backpack looked. But hey, we all knew he was the hero of the story. He wasn't going to stay broke forever. Fast forward to the exam hall, where the teacher asked everyone to wake up and start the paper. But being the chilled-out guy that he was, Tian replied that there were still 10 minutes left. The teacher was furious, yelling at the class about how they were all worthless and brainless. She then asked Tian why he was staring out of the window, hoping to catch him cheating. But Tian wasn't fazed. He casually replied, "What if I get the answers from there?" Suddenly, a gust of wind came in, and a helicopter appeared outside the window with all the answers to the paper. The students were gobsmacked, and Tian shouted, "What are you waiting for? Copy everything down!" They quickly went to work, furiously scribbling down the answers. After submitting his paper, Tian was about to leave, but the teacher stopped him, warning everyone that cheating would result in a big fat zero. Just then, the helicopter pilot demanded payment, and Tian, who had forgotten to pay, quickly ran to the window and threw out a bag full of money. As he left the college, Tian thought to himself, "That was a close call." Later, we found out that his mission was to spend $150,000 during the time of the exam, and he succeeded in doing just that. Lin Tian was thinking about his new ability to spend thriftily that had started 1 week ago. Lin was standing in line at the bank, feeling anxious about his deposit. He had been working a part-time job for a month, and his payout was barely enough to cover his bills. He wondered if even a robber wouldn't be happy to steal this little amount. Suddenly, the sound of a gunshot shattered the silence. Lin turned around and saw a group of masked robbers storming into the bank, wielding guns and demanding everyone to squat down. Lin's heart raced as he tried to think of a way to protect himself and his money. He quickly tried to stash money in his pants, hoping that the robbers wouldn't notice, but one of them caught him in the act and demanded to know what he was doing. Panicking, Lin lied and said that he was scratching his back. The robber didn't buy his story and was about to shoot him, but he was distracted by a commotion on the other side of the bank. Lin took advantage of the distraction and made a run for it, but he heard the sound of a woman screaming. One of the robbers was bothering a beautiful woman and trying to make advances on her. Meanwhile, the main robber of the group, a Sigma male, asked his accomplice why he was bothering the woman. His accomplice replied that she was too perfect to resist, but the woman shut him down, stating she wasn't interested in someone like him. As Lin managed to press the emergency button and open the door, feeling a surge of courage, he shouted at the robber to leave the woman alone and claimed that she was his counselor, Miss Chan. In a heroic effort to protect her, however, Lin's bravery quickly turned into perverted behavior as he offered to flirt with any woman who was interested. Suddenly, the main robber noticed that the emergency door was open and shot Lin without hesitation. Lin lay on the floor dying and regretting that he never got the chance to spend his hard-earned money. As Lin's life faded away, he got a new mission: to spend $3 million as a reward. He was given a second chance at life and the ability to spend money without a care in the world. He opened his eyes and found himself alive, and the robber was speechless. Lin looked at the clock and decided to take action within the next 3 minutes. The main robber's eyes widened in shock as Lin, whom he thought was dead, appeared to be alive and well. He pointed his gun at Lin and demanded to know what he had seen. Lin seethed with anger inside, remembering the robber had shot him before. However, he put on a facade of fear to hide his true feelings, biding his time until the opportune moment arrived. Then, Lin executed his plan. He pointed at one of the other robbers and accused him of hiding money in his pants. The accused robber looked bewildered and denied the accusation, but Lin persisted. The main robber, sensing that something was amiss, pushed Lin towards the other robber, hoping to intimidate him into confessing. Meanwhile, Lin blinked at Miss Chan, silently signaling that he had a plan. He then proceeded to demonstrate to everyone that money was coming out of the other robber's pants. The main robber was stunned to realize that his men were not as loyal as he had thought. Lin continued to play the fool, suggesting that they should use bags instead of pockets to avoid being caught. The other robber tried to clear his name, but Lin persisted in his act, insisting that it was impossible to hide large amounts of money in pants. The accused robber accused Lin of setting him up, but Lin calmly explained that he was only trying to be a gentleman. He helped Miss Chan to her feet and pointed out that the other robber had used her to conceal the money. Lin quickly called Miss Chan and placed a reassuring hand on her back. With a deft trick, he conjured up a handful of money and accused one of the other robbers of forcing Miss Chan to hide it. The accused robber was dumbfounded by the accusation, but Lin's true abilities were just beginning to come to light. He revealed that he had a money-spending system, a spendthrift, by which he could summon any amount of money to any location he desired. The main robber was furious at the revelation that his men were not honest. The other robbers protested their innocence by calling it Lin's trick, but the main robber, in a fit of rage, declared that he didn't believe in any tricks. As the situation grew more tense, Lin found that he was the leader of the group. He produced a large bundle of cash and accused the main robber of hiding it. It was all part of his plan. The other robbers were furious and started calling the main robber by his real name in a fit of rage. The main robber began firing on his own men, and the others soon followed suit. Bullets whizzed through the air as Lin grabbed Miss Chan and pulled her down to the ground. When the dust settled, all the robbers lay unconscious on the ground, but Lin knew that he still had work to do. With only a minute left to complete his mission, he suddenly felt a cold object pressed against the back of his head. He turned slowly, his heart racing, to find the main robber pointing a gun directly at him. The robber found out that Lin played a game with them with his few tricks up one sleeve. Miss Chan saw the situation escalating and quickly covered Lin with her body. But as the robber fired the shot, she thought she would be counted as a great teacher. Suddenly, everyone was shocked, including the robber. Miss Chan closed her eyes, accepting the end, but suddenly she realized she was feeling no pain. When she opened her eyes, she saw a shield of money in front of her which Lin had summoned to protect her. The robber was now even more enraged and tried to shoot again, but Lin was prepared. He summoned money into the gun, causing it to backfire and explode in the robber's face. Everyone was surprised, and Lin pretended to be amazed to see this, but we all know who the hero is. Miss Chan, relieved and grateful, asked Lin to move his hands before he would be surprised, as they were in an awkward position. Lin played foolish and apologized but enjoyed what he had done. However, as he touched the money he had summoned, it disappeared, and he realized that he couldn't spend it. Just as Lin was about to leave, the cops rushed into the bank, but to their surprise, the case was already solved. Lin handed over the situation to a female cop and left the bank. However, the cop noticed that $200 were in his back pocket. Suddenly, she got annoyed when Lin called her, "Madam," and shouted that she was too young for that. At the school, Miss Chan was delivering a lecture, and Lin, as always, was snoring loudly in the back. Sensing a disturbance, she called out his name. The astute student sitting next to Lin noticed him dozing off again. As Lin opened his eyes, he found Miss Chan staring at him. He gave her a quick up-and-down glance before apologizing and explaining that he was exhausted from his job the day before. While the class expected Lin to get reprimanded, Chen hesitated, remembering from the day before. She chose to gently remind him to stay focused when she turned around. Suddenly, Chan's pants ripped on a table, and Lin couldn't help but sneak a perverted glance. The entire class was shocked that Lin didn't face any consequences for his behavior. Just as the bell rang, a student's phone rang with news of Lin's heroic act of saving a bank from a robbery. However, not everyone believed it. As the bell rang, Lin was surrounded by a group of admiring girls, all eager to know how he managed to save the hostages. Lin played along, enjoying the attention. The class decided to celebrate Lin's achievement, and an astute student suggested hosting a meal for the class. One boy suggested that Lin wouldn't become a big star without it, and all other girls agreed. When they turned to look for Lin, he had vanished. Lin tried to slip out unnoticed, not wanting to spend his money on a meal. However, as he left, he overheard someone laughing and calling him a loser. The same sharp student felt a tap on his shoulder and turned to see a cool and collected Lin. To everyone's surprise, Lin invited the entire class to a big meal in the canteen, explaining that he had received a new mission. Although the astute boy felt depressed, the other students were ecstatic. As Lin hosted the meal, in a badass response, he declared that the treat was on him and led the class to the canteen, allowing students to invite their friends. The girls around Lin were also excited about the event. The astute student couldn't help but ask if Lin wasn't embarrassed by taking them to the canteen. However, Lin confidently replied that he could buy them a meal. After the chaos settled, the classroom was empty except for 3 boys, one of whom asked Jiang to join Lin's treat. However, Jan kicked him off and instead ordered another guy to invite everyone to a fest at the canteen. The other boy thought that Jan was planning to make Lin homeless while Zhang's thoughts were elsewhere. At the canteen, the students were buzzing with chatter about Lin being invited to the whole school and wondering if he had lost his mind after getting famous. Suddenly, a chef tried to make his way through the crowd, and the students realized he was from Zhang's hotel. Zhang then called out to all the students and announced his treat. He revealed a luxurious food truck that was full of delicious and aromatic food. Zhang's friends started inviting other students to join them, and the students were amazed to see the variety of food on offer, comparing it to the usual canteen fare. Zhang's friends were praising him for arranging such a royal feast for the students, and were even shaming Lin. The girls around Lin began to act like they wanted to leave him and join Zhang's treat, citing their hunger as the reason. Later on, Lin is feeling a bit overwhelmed as he realizes that spending money isn't easy. Suddenly, his phone rang, and the person on the other end was apologizing for being late due to windy weather. Lin remains chilled out. Jack noticed Lin talking on the phone and suddenly noticed something else. They all watched in awe as big containers fell from the sky with parachutes attached. Then, a beautiful lady landed with Swat holding 2 layman chefs in her hands, and a container dropped just behind her. When the container opened, it was full of food, much to everyone's delight. The students were amazed by the sudden appearance of the extra food and started thinking that it was Zhang who had arranged the backup food. They called their friends to join the coup and sample the delicious food. However, Zhang assumed that it must be his other friend who had arranged the backup food and started acting cool, showing that money wasn't a big deal. But when he went to greet the woman who came with the food, she unexpectedly slapped him. She then went over to Lin, who calmly said that money wasn't a big deal. He could have doubled it. As Lin's assistant introduced herself and apologized for being late, Lin was relaxed and ordered her to start cooking, using the nickname Silly. Silly smiled and stayed calm while Lin handed her a water bottle and reminded her to serve more rice and water. As Lin made his way to the canteen, Silly was taken aback by his calm demeanor. Soon, word spread among the students that Lin was the one who arranged the container, making Zhang seem inferior in comparison. Zhang became angry and boasted about his world-class royal cooks, including a 5-star chef, while belittling Lin's man's professional abilities. Suddenly, Zhang's 5-star chef knelt before Lin's layman, pleading to be trained. However, Lin's team declined, citing that they were already highly skilled. Frustrated, Jiang threatened to fire his staff, but Lin's interruption put a stop to the argument. Despite feeling hungry, Lin's layman advised him to wait, leaving Jiang speechless. In the tense situation, Jiang grabbed his friend and shook him, feeling betrayed before kicking him out. Later, Jiang watched from the window to see what Lin had organized. Silly arrived with her team, each carrying covered dishes, and announced the first dish to be a salad. While Lin was eager to eat rice, Silly got a little disappointed. But when she opened the lid of the salad, everyone was shocked to see a cabbage. Jiang was super happy to see this, and the girl who tasted it couldn't help but blush with delight. As she overexaggerated, Lin was surprised by the girl's reaction and wondered why she was so red over just a tasty cabbage. Still, he interrupted and explained that it was a cabbage-shaped truffle. As Lin tasted it, he claimed it to be better than that of the canteen. Everyone was disappointed to hear a better word, as it's worth a whopping $30,000. Silly served the other dishes at the table, and the students were amazed to find that they were the same as the ones served in the canteen but were much more delicious and expensive. Some students who had tasted Jiang's food before trying Lin's dishes concluded that Lin was more lavish and majestic. Jiang couldn't believe that he had lost to Lin. Silly asked Lin if he wanted more food, but he declined as he was already full. However, he was a little unsatisfied because the water they served him was ice cold. Silly explained that the water was taken from a snow mountain just for him. But when she tried to return the change, Lin struck his hand on the table and declined it in a badass way, giving it to her as a tip. The students were amazed by Lin's swag, and some girls started having a crush on him. Meanwhile, Lin was weeping in his mind as he wanted to eat more rice. But as his mission was completed, he got a prize wheel as a reward, by which his random organ would be enhanced. As the wheel started spinning, he got scared, thinking what if his appendix enhanced. When it stopped, Lin didn't realize which organ was enhanced, but when he looked around, he was able to see through the first layer of girls' clothes. He revealed his power as X-ray vision, and he was enjoying his ability and smiling, as the system was too kind to him. When girls approached him, he bled out, and we have seen enough on the internet to know why this happened. After a few days, that gorgeous female cop arrived at the college to interrogate Lin regarding the bank robbery case. She immediately noticed some students and stopped them. They stopped and asked, "What can I do for you, madam?" This hurt her, and she introduced herself as Ju YY. She noticed that everyone was carrying a plastic bag to carry their belongings, and the students claimed that it was a trend that started after Master Lin treated them. She thought that Master Lin must have a dandy personality. However, she got angry when the students called her Miss again. While she was scanning the area, she spotted Lin Tian standing between a group of girls. She was not expecting to find him so soon. Meanwhile, on his screen, Lin entered the mission selection interface as he completed his tutorial. As he was selecting a mission, he accidentally brushed his hand against a girl's breasts, causing it to bubble. It took him a while to choose his mission because the higher the difficulty, the harsher the punishment. The girl offered him a night out alone with them. The cop was confused if Lin was the Master Lin involved in the robbery case. Lindsay Midge was a broken man, so she initially disagreed with the idea, but as she thought more about it, she realized that Lin must be the one who became rich overnight after the robbery. She shouted his name and ran towards him. Lin was selecting the difficulty and decided to start with the easy one. While the cop was turning to investigate, Lin mistakenly pressed a button that he shouldn't have. He thought he was screwed, and the cop replied that he definitely was. Lin pressed a hard button on her, causing her to be shy. Realizing his mistake, Lin ran away while the cop shouted at him to stop. As punishment for selecting the hard level, his new mission was to buy a vehicle in 6 hours and win an underground race. If he succeeded, he would receive a grand prize wheel, but if he failed, he would lose his language skills. When Lin realized the consequences of losing, he knew he couldn't afford to lose. He watched the time and started running with confidence. It was easy for him, and suddenly he felt like he was flying. However, Zoe gave him a choke slam as Lin accidentally touched her hard button again. They slipped, and they both fell into an awkward position. Lin felt something heavy on his face, and it turned out to be the cop. Suddenly he heard a clicking sound and found himself arrested for sexually molesting a cop. Lin's face turned speechless and tearful. Later at the police station, Lin and Zofa faced each other. She tried to take Lin's confession, but he tried to convince her that everything was just a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, Zofa was not convinced, and she had fun screaming at Lin. Suddenly her phone rang, and she received orders to leave Lin. Lin's assistant arrived and released him with a bail paper. She introduced herself as Lin's lawyer. Just as he was released, he rushed towards the nearest car dealership to buy a car worth $2 million. He got screwed as the dealership was closed. After that, when Lin crossed the road, he wondered where he could find his vehicle. Suddenly, he was just narrowly saved from a bus. The driver of the bus shouted at Lin that he could have died. But the bus caught Lin's eye. He took a look around the bus and found that it was sleek and modern with all the latest features and amenities. He knew that it was the vehicle he had been searching for, and just for $20 million, he made up his mind to buy that bus. Lin was happy because his speaking ability was preserved from loss, and he got a new bus that would save his time. Lin was confident as his first mission was completed, but when he saw the second mission, he was screwed as he had to win an underground mountain race with his bus at the same night, and he didn't even have any driving license. He heard a voice saying she can help. When Lin turned with glowing eyes, he found it to be Silly, his assistant. He fell on her feet and hugged her. Silly was a little uncomfortable and asked Lin to remove his hand as he was putting his hands on her soft, bouncy part. Suddenly, Lin got serious. He climbed on the bus, calling Silly as they were going to be late. At the same night of the mountain race, racers were debating who would win as they had supercars, but Jang was also there to race, and another racer tried to bully Jang as he was lost from Lin on that feast day. Jang grabbed his collar and was about to fight, but a beautiful girl with a perfect figure separated them. Both of them started staring at her. That boy introduced her as the racing goddess of that area. She got in her car, a girlified Supra, and anyone could only unmask her if he wins against her. Jiang was planning to see her face. Jan called out to start the race, but suddenly a bright light made Jane blind for some seconds. There was Lin asking others to wait for him. Lin's bus was ready to race with other cars, but it was embarrassing for other cars as well as for Silly because she was racing for the first time with a bus. Jang was mad to see Lin there racing, but Lin was calm. However, when he found that masked girl standing next to him, he used his X-ray vision to find her real identity. He found her to be Susuking, a renowned beautiful girl of his school. Sushi King was the goddess of all boys in the school. She was perfect in everything, including her figure, appearance, sports, and studies. A kind-hearted sweet girl, but Lin didn't even think about her to be a racer. She asked Lin why he was staring at her. Lin tried to look around. He didn't think of her to be a dominant racer as the referee counted all of them rushed to win. Meanwhile, Arlen was chilled out, thinking Lin would defeat Lin as he was using a bus. He rushed from there to defeat Lin, but Lin and Susing were still standing next to each other. Lin asked her why she was still standing there. She replied that she made a deal with a referee that she would start her engine after 5 minutes, otherwise she was said to bully other racers. Lin decided to wait for her, but she asked that Lin would lose the 500,000 entry fee if he lost the race. Lin was super chilled out outside, but inside, he was weeping because he couldn't spend any money until its mission. He watched his piggy clock and replied with swag that it was not declared who would win the race. Street King was full of questions about how anyone could win a race with an unmodified bus, but Lin was calm as he had a master plan. She started her engine and drove away in her Supra. Lin signaled to his assistant to initiate the plan. He picked up his phone and made a call. As the person on the other end answered, Lin spoke in a hushed voice about underground races happening in the mountains. Meanwhile, Jian was driving recklessly, determined to defeat Lin and take revenge for a previous loss. Suddenly, his car tire blew out, and he lost control. He ended up stopping at a location where the police had laid spikes on the road to catch illegal racers. Zoe got him red-handed and arrested him for taking part in an illegal race. She couldn't help but wonder who had reported the race to the authorities. She knew that these races were often kept secret, and it was rare for someone to speak up about them. Back on the road, Lin and Silly were lagging behind in the race, and Silly suggested taking a shortcut to catch up. But Lin had a better plan. He knew of a narrow road that the other racers would have to take to avoid the police, and he had arranged to block it. This would force the other racers to detour and give Lin the advantage he needed to win. As they approached the location where the police had arrested several racers, Zhao, the police officer in charge, was berating the drivers. Silly swerved to avoid the spikes on the road and ended up scraping the side of Vao's pants, causing her embarrassment and red-faced. She returned to confront the culprit, only to find Lin grinning slyly at her. She accused him of participating in the illegal race, but Lin produced a fake bus ticket, claiming that he was simply on his way home by public transport. Zhao was skeptical but couldn't prove anything, so she let them go as the bus disappeared into the distance. Jiang realized there were no public buses in the area and vowed that Lin would pay for her ruined pants. After some time, Silly informed Lin that they were in the lead and successfully completed the first part of the mountain. However, their lead was suddenly lost as other racers overtook them with their supercars. Silly was surprised at how Lin had managed to take the lead in the first part with the bus. Despite her curiosity, as she passed Lin's bus, she wondered if he was the person who had called the police earlier. Despite her curiosity, she quickly accelerated her Supra and left them behind. He updated Lin about their current position in the race, informing him that they were now in last place. Lin, however, remained calm and collected, putting on his sunglasses and reaching for his phone to initiate Plan B. Meanwhile, the other racers were pushing hard to win, with one of them activating Metro mode to gain an advantage. However, their excitement was short-lived when they saw heavy lights shining down on them, causing the driver to panic and stop their car, thinking they were being invaded by aliens. But it was Lin who had orchestrated the spectacle using lights, with a range above the skyscrapers, to distract and confuse the other racers. He fired some darts with a straw, hitting the racers in the neck and putting them to sleep. Lin reminded them of the story of the rabbit and the tortoise, telling them to sleep like a rabbit. He commended Silly on her blowing technique, which she thought was the technique she learned from a spy. They moved ahead, leaving the other racers behind, but Suzuki was too clever for their trick. She put on her sunglasses and activated her nitro mode to get in the lead, speeding away in her supercar like a rocket. Meanwhile, Lin asked Silly how far they were from the finish line while he was waiting for a live stream, feeling bored. He had been searching for a worthy opponent, but suddenly heard a noise. It was Suzuki, whose car jumped over Lin's bus and overtook him. They both stared at each other, and she threatened to defeat him, while Lin thought about how he could catch up as Suzuki passed him. Silly asked if he had another plan, but Lin wasn't prepared for this. He asked Silly to throw his walkie-talkie to Suzuki's car. She accepted Lin's command, ripped off some of her clothes, tied them to the walkie-talkie, made him meet her hammer, and threw it at Suzuki's car like a cannon. So, remembering something in her car, Lin offered to talk to her, but she declined, saying Lin fell at her feet. Lin took her as a good idea after he won the race. Su declined to let Lin win, but Lin called her by her real name, Su Chuking. She was shocked to hear her real name and panicked as she disguised herself properly. Lin revealed he not only knew about her looks but also the color of her undergarments, and blackmailed her to reveal her identity in public. She was torn between winning the race and protecting her identity, but Lin's words hit home, and she stopped her car. Lin crossed the finish line first, winning the tournament. Sue was left to contemplate the consequences of her actions. But Lin had no time to celebrate. He rushed out of the race and joined a live stream by Sweet Fifi. She was dancing and urging her viewers to give her rewards, and Lin couldn't help but smile at the thought of her real identity. Lin watched Sweet Fifi stream with a smile on his face as she danced while a cat was staring at her from behind. Suddenly, the cat jumped on her, causing her to fall and get scratches on her thighs. Some viewers commented on her being a clumsy streamer, and she stopped showing her face. Lin was outraged at how people could judge his goddess, and he felt sorry for her. He wished he had the money to help her become a famous streamer. Suddenly, he noticed that his finger was glowing. Other viewers noticed that someone had become a noble VIP member of Sweet Fifi's stream. Lin thought a rich man with good taste had donated a noble crown to her, but to his surprise, it was his own screen name. He had become a noble VIP member of Sweet Fifi's stream and was also the top contributor. He realized that he was a rich man with good taste and felt proud of himself. However, he remembered that he had forgotten to see the reward for his previous mission. He quickly checked his screen and found out that the reward was a gold finger, which allowed him to spend unlimited money online on any website but only once. Lin thought he had wasted his reward but didn't dwell on it for long. Later at school, he felt sleepy as usual but was caught off guard when he saw a girl with a bandage on her thigh, the same location where Sweet Fifi had gotten scratches. At first, Lin thought it was his goddess, but when the girl turned around, he saw that it was Suzuki. Lin breathed a sigh of relief as he realized that Sue and the streamer he watched online were completely different people. When Sue tried to strike up a conversation with him, he politely declined, explaining that they had never met before. Sue looked hurt, but deep down, she was seething with anger and plotting her revenge against Lin for the previous night. Just then, Lin noticed a bright flash of light coming from the other side of the classroom. He immediately called out, "Who is responsible for that harsh light?" It turned out to be Jang, who had become bald and was sitting in the same class as Lin. Jang was always getting into trouble whenever he crossed paths with Lin, and he was unhappy to see him again. Suddenly, Jang realized that it was Lin who had called the police the night before. He began to shout and blame Lin for his baldness, but Lin denied the accusation, saying that he was with Sue the previous night. Sue was shocked, but she remained quiet. She was about to hurt Lin for his behavior, but she couldn't do anything, and everyone in the class began to whisper and gossip about their relationship, while Sue remained calm, controlling her anger. Suddenly, Miss Chan walked into the classroom and gestured for the students to take their seats as she stepped up to the whiteboard. Lin noticed something peculiar. He took a second glance at her and remembered the scratch on her thigh. As he continued to scrutinize her appearance, he realized that she was none other than Sweet Fifi, his favorite streamer. Lin thought Lin was oblivious to Miss Chan's instructions, and she had to call out to him to get his attention. However, Lin's elation was short-lived as he received a mission with a difficulty level beyond his imagination. He had to collect the top 3 streamers in a week, with a secret reward waiting for him. Although there were no consequences for failure, he was unsure about what collection meant in this context. Determined to succeed, he felt he needed to confirm Miss Chan's identity as Sweet Fifi, who was one of the top streamers. To do so, he activated his X-ray vision. He was going to find a mark which was on, but was left awestruck when he saw her figure was too perfect for words. He wept silently, realizing that he could only see above the first layer of clothing. However, when he tried to get closer to her to examine her more closely, Miss Chan became visibly disturbed by his behavior. Lin has always acted like a fool. Suddenly, Miss Chan's phone rang. She got worried seeing the color. After letting her class go free, she was scared when she answered the call and quickly left the room. Lin, who was in the class, noticed the tears in her eyes and recognized the same heartbroken expression he had seen on sweet Fifi's face. Filled with rage, Lin followed Chan, determined to protect his goddess from any harm. Chan hopped on her scooter and went away, but a mysterious figure kept tabs on her every move. The figure informed someone from the other side of Chan's location and asked him to make pressure on her. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Chan was trying to convince the doctor to perform a critical operation on her father. Despite her best efforts, the doctor refused, stating that they had already performed a free operation on her father. Chan felt helpless and began to weep uncontrollably. As Chan was struggling with her emotions, she received a message offering her $50,000 for having lunch with a man named Mr. Zhao. Considering the offer, Chan walked out of the hospital and found Mr. Zhu and the figure waiting for her outside. They asked Chan if she was ready for lunch, but the other one was pressuring her to follow the contract they signed before. However, things took a violent turn when the figure touched Chan's face. In a fit of rage, someone punched the figure, sending them flying. Miss Chan was surprised to see this. It was Lin standing there, ready to protect her and ready for a fight. Lin grabbed her hand and announced that he would keep her safe from harm. Chan looked at Lin with gratitude and relief, feeling a newfound sense of security. Miss Chan was reminded of the contract she had signed with the gangster. He told her that she had signed it without reading it carefully and warned her that the consequences could be worse. Lin slapped him, ignoring his contract with Miss Chan. He firmly believed that the gangster had no right to talk to her in that manner. Chan was blushing that Lin was saving her. The other guy stood up, spitting out 2 teeth. They both took out their knives and lunged at Lin, determined to take his life. But Lin reminded them who the king was and warned them to turn back. They both hesitated, their fear palpable. When they finally turned, they found that Lin had fooled them, and he grabbed Miss Chan and started running from there. Lin managed to reach the bus and stepped up, but the gangsters followed them and caught up to them. Lin was sitting on the seat with Miss Chan awkwardly on his lap. He ordered the gangsters to get off his bus, but they thought he was trying to fool them again. Suddenly, a knee came from the air and landed on the gangster's face. It was Silly who had arrived at a critical moment. She beat both of them mercilessly and threw them out of the bus. Lin flexed his bus out of the window as they sped away from there. Miss Chan interrupted him, asking to be put down before he acted foolishly again. Lin, as always, did the same, thinking his trick had worked again, and dropped her off. But Miss Chan had something else in mind. She wanted to apologize to the gangsters because she had signed the contract with them without fully understanding it. Lin claimed her as his after doing that. Lin had gotten one of 3 streamers he needed to complete the mission, and he would get the other 2 separately. Miss Chan interrupted him during his statement and asked what he meant, but she got shy when Lin put his face on her pillow and said she will be his soon. But she reminded him that she was his counselor. Lin acted like a fool again and dropped her off at her stop. She was speechless as Lin went away, thinking about their relationship because she also had some feelings for Lin, but she was his teacher. Later, as Lin and Silly arrived at a mysterious location far from town and resembling an old factory, Silly asked him if they had reached their destination. However, Silly asked him about calling more men. Lin ignored him and instead replied that he just wanted to retrieve the item he needed. Still, he then handed him a bag containing a missile launcher, and Lin stepped off the bus with confidence, knowing he had the firepower he needed. Upon reaching the gate of a location, Lin overheard the goons whispering about him and his bag. Although the location was empty, Lin demanded that someone turn on the lights or he would be late for the live stream. Finally, a man appeared who looked like a businessman, and it was revealed that Lin had come to kidnap his artist, Chan aka Sweet Fifi, from his company. The businessman reminded Lin of the consequences of kidnapping her, but Lin remained calm and collected, having no fear of anything. His sole purpose was to free Chan from the contract she was under, and he shouted his justification. However, he had no words left to convince the businessman. Lin remained relaxed as he put his hand inside his jacket, causing the gangster's bodyguards to surround him, thinking he had a gun. To their surprise, Lin pulled out a Peggy key, which he used to unlock his missile bag. The gangsters took their positions, thinking it was a real weapon. Suddenly, Silly jumped in and started fighting the gangsters while Lin stepped forward, pointing his gun at the businessman. He stepped on his table, ready to pull the trigger. The gangster begged for mercy while his men were threatened that their boss was about to die. When Lin finally fired, the gangster closed his eyes, bracing for impact. However, when he opened his eyes, he felt like he was in a paradise of money, as the money was raining on him like a shower. It was revealed that the gun Lin used to shoot him was a supreme money cannon, continuously shooting money on them. Considering himself as a god of money, he showed them a photo of Miss Chan, ordering them that she is free from their contract. But when the gangsters showed disagreement, Lin threw that empty cannon and took out 2 more money cannons and shot them on the gangster's face recklessly. He was not able to say anything. Lin again considered this as an excuse, and he took out 3 cannons and fired them like a rain of money. All were enjoying it, thinking him to be a reckless billionaire. Lin got the Miss Chan's contract, and as he was leaving, he warned them not to disturb her again. Later on the bus, Silly asked why he spent so much money on his counselor if it wasn't real money. Lin tore that contract and revealed with coolness that he could spend money on his counselor, but he couldn't spend on gangsters who bully Miss Chan. On the other side, the gangsters were shocked because the money Lin sprayed was fake. One of them found only 3 real notes, and that was just $250. That $250 was used to call someone a fool indirectly. The gangster punched that guy who revealed about $250 and insulted him. Suddenly, he felt something on his head. He thought it was another fake gun, but it was a real one. When he turned around, he found her to be Miss Cow, one of the top streamers and his boss. He laid at her feet, apologizing for his mistake, but she kicked him off to climb the apology and was ready to shoot him. The next day, Miss Chan was sitting in her office when she noticed a mysterious box that had been sent by Lin. It had a heart sticker on the outside, and when she opened it, she was left wide-mouthed. Inside, she found the shattered remains of her contract with the gangsters, rendering it invalid. Additionally, there was a letter from Lin's artist agency inviting her to join them. However, since she didn't know that Lin was Tangian Lin, she assumed it was one of her noble VIP members. As Miss Chan was going through the box, Silly was keeping a watchful eye on her from a tree outside while Lin rested below. Suddenly, Silly jumped down from the tree, and Lin asked her if Miss Chan had signed their contract. Silly confirmed that she had, explaining that Miss Chan had no other choice since she needed the money for her father's operation. Lin was overjoyed that he had acquired one of the top 3 streamers, as Miss Chan was one of them. He had gifted her his power, the golden finger, but couldn't use it again. As a result, he had to use money to buy the other 2 streamers. Lin checked the list of top streamers and saw that the first was Cao Bullo, the boss of the gangsters. He boarded her bus with the intention of spending money within limits to complete the mission. Lin presented his offer to Cao, and she accepted it without any hesitation, even though she was currently the top streamer. Lin was surprised at how easily he had won her over. He was ecstatic when she lunged at him, calling him a good man. However, unknown to him, Cao had her sinister plan up her sleeve. She offered Lin a drink, which he consumed without hesitation. While he drank, Cao signaled to her assistant to execute their plan. The bold assistant snuck onto Lin's bus, but Silly noticed him and shot him with a dart from her blowpipe. Silly thought she had won, but the man remained unaffected. He introduced himself as Mori Gautreau, an expert martial artist, and explained that he was immune to anesthesia. Silly tried to punch him, but he was too flexible as he dodged the punch. He grabbed Silly's hand and spun her around like a top, evading her every move. Despite her best efforts, Silly was no match for him. He dodged all her attacks and made her unconscious in just one shot. As she was sleeping, he took a selfie with her with a cat filter. At Kao's office, Lin and Kao were sharing a drink. But things took an unexpected turn as they talked. Kao began to suspect that she had successfully drugged Lin with the hallucinatory substance that she had concealed on her person. Lin appeared to be losing consciousness, and Kao gloated over her victory, revealing her plan to destroy the contract and incriminate Lin by throwing him in his own bus full of crime evidence, ensuring his imprisonment. But suddenly, Lin spoke up, revealing that the wine had not tasted right to him. He was now fully awake and aware of Kao's nefarious intentions. Kat was taken aback by the revelation that Lin was still conscious and quickly realized that he had discovered her plan. Lin revealed that he had a habit of using his X-ray vision to scam people and had already noticed something suspicious on Kao's thighs despite her attempts to hide the drug, but she remained unsuccessful. Lin was a bit embarrassed with his habit. Lin then stood up and warned Ko to be careful because he had switched the glasses before they began drinking, in his cool way. Ko was stunned by the revelation that her plan had failed and Lin had outsmarted her. She called Lin a pervert, which triggered him to advance towards her. She got shy, but Lin passed a creepy smile. Ko felt threatened that Lin might do something bad to her, but Lin had something else in his mind. He took out his plastic bag and started storing leftover food. She was annoyed that Lin cared more about leftover food than her beauty. Lin replied that she is not as valuable as food. She was pissed off, so she kicked the table, which ruined the food. Lin became angry as he hated wasting food. He pulled her forcefully and sat her on his lap. He raised his hand and started hitting her back as a punishment. She yelled at him, but he didn't stop. He was enjoying it. When Lin felt that she had received enough punishment, he let her go and took the leftover food while she was still lying with a red face as she enjoyed the punishment. Lin left, and her assistant came inside. The assistant noticed that she looked weird and asked if she needed anything, but she declined, saying she was fine. She asked about the job she had given him, and he confirmed that Lin would soon be in prison. As Lin boarded the bus, he noticed that Silly was also a beautiful woman he hadn't noticed before. Suddenly, the police surrounded their bus, shouting at Lin to come out as they had information that he was hiding a large sum of money. Lin opened the bus door confused, but Silly pulled out a gun and placed it in his hand. The officer smiled, thinking he had caught Lin red-handed, and ordered his men to shoot Lin. When the officer shouted at his men to fire, someone roared towards him, which made the officer angry. But it was Sue standing next to Lin to save him. She stopped them from firing because the gun in Lin's hand was a water gun. When Lin fired it, he found it to be a water gun, and he was speechless. The officer shouted again because Lin's behavior was dangerous according to him. Sue informed the officer that she had sealed all the areas, and Lin couldn't escape from there. The officer was putting allegations on Sue to save Lin, but she didn't have a grudge on him. Suddenly, Lin jumped from behind and grabbed her tightly from behind, saying that he was that innocent guy. But she was still suspecting him and was blocking. Suddenly, the officer pushed her out of the way, causing her to fall to the ground. This act of aggression made Lin furious, but the officer simply laughed, feeling confident that no one could stop him. However, Lin smiled, showing that he was not intimidated. Lin quickly called someone for help from a nearby narrow street. The officer was taken aback when a drone suddenly appeared and began recording him. His anger rose to new heights, and he leaped forward, grabbing the drone and breaking it into pieces. The officer demanded to know what more Lin could do, but Lin was unimpressed. In fact, he took the opportunity to boast to the officer about his agency that represented top streamers like Cabulo. The officer retaliated by snatching a gun from another cop, threatening to end Lin's life and prevent him from using his wealth. But Lin was not intimidated, and he grew tired of the officer's threats. The situation took a surprising turn when the officer pointed the gun at Lin, causing his wig to fall off, revealing a bald head. Suddenly, a crowd had gathered at this point, thinking that they were watching a movie shoot that Cabello was involved in. They began to touch the officer and his guns, thinking that he was in a movie shoot, while Lin coolly reminded them that he could do anything with his money. At Cabello's office, her drug effects had worn off. She asked her assistant about the current status of Lin, thinking that he must be in bad condition. The assistant agreed as he had done his job. Cabello tried to call Lin to show him the power and consequences of offending her, but she found that his phone had been changed with Lin's piggy phone. She was shouting in frustration as Lin had outsmarted her once again. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lin was using her phone to do a live stream and collect people. He felt that Cabello's plan couldn't be simple, so he changed their phones. He was amazed to see the power of popularity, and finally signed the contract that Cabello had already signed. As he signed, he got 2 streamers and only needed 1 more. Lin communicated with the viewers during the live streams of Cabello and Free Faye and asked her viewers to follow him on his page. As soon as Lin ended his lines, he got 1.5 million viewers, but it was still not enough. On top, Lin was thinking of a plan to boost his followers when suddenly the officers shot their guns in the air, and the crowd scattered with the sound. The officers said that they couldn't shoot Lin, but they would definitely search his bus. Lin found it to be a way to become more popular and acted like an innocent person trying to stop them. But the cop was working for Cabello and attended to him for the consequences of offending her. He took the phone from which Lin was streaming and broke it, and his men rushed into the bus. Lin remained calm and thanked him for what he did. The officer was shocked as Lin's behavior changed to polite, and he asked him if he wanted to talk about something private, but Lin declined, saying that the cop had broken the phone he was using to live stream. But now Lin had many phones for the same purpose, and everyone in the crowd was streaming live. The officer started sweating bullets, and suddenly one of his men found the suspicious box. The officer took a deep breath, thinking about his plan of planting suspicious items in Lin's bus had been completed, and now he could arrest him. But when the box opened with the light, they were wide-mouthed seeing the stuff inside the bag. The officer started flexing, saying that he had strong evidence against Lin Tian. But Lin, acting like he loves studies too much, confused the officer with his statement. The officer got blank when he saw that the bag was filled with books. He shouted and asked him about the illegal money, but Lin, as always, used his trick to play foolishly. The officer got enraged knowing that there was illegal money but it had been changed by Lin. Lin announced that the police officers were trying to frame him intentionally, and the cop pointed his gun at Lin about to shoot, but Lin held his gun in his heroic way and reminded him of the consequences. The cops strode confidently through the crowd thinking he was invincible, but Lin wasn't afraid. He smiled as someone arrived there. When the cop turned, he was surprised to see Mr. Zhao, a powerful figure in the judicial department, approach him, and the cop fell at their feet. But Zhao wasted no time and quickly took charge of the situation, arresting the cop for his despicable behavior. Lin was enjoying his victory and the fame he got, and Zhao praised him for his quick thinking and bravery. Lin felt a surge of pride knowing that he had made a difference. However, things got a little awkward when Zhao praised Lin as his daughter's smart boyfriend, as Lin was actually her suspect. Ms. Zhao blushed at her father's comment and tried to hide her embarrassment. As Lin's popularity soared, he discovered that he could disappear and send money with ease. He felt like a superhero using his skills for his personal profits. With his mission complete, Lin eagerly awaited his reward, and he had his heart set on enhanced X-rayed vision by which he could see above the second layer of clothes. But he was presented with two options instead and chose the main plot mission because he didn't know the meaning of private vault. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure in the shadows watched Lin's every move. He sensed something brewing but remained calm and collected, waiting patiently for his moment to strike. As Lin selected the main plot mission, his first objective was to establish a company and expand it. However, this time his reward would be given based on his progress in the mission. After a few days, Lin was seated at a table, deep in thought about his mission. Though they already had two employees, including Chan and Cabullo, he still needed a premise and had to make a trade. He shuffled to himself, thinking about how he would soon become rich. Suddenly, a man struck a juice bottle on the counter, demanding a bill. Lin apologized for his mistake and began to serve the customer, feeling disheartened that he still had to work at his own expense. Shortly after, another girl named Queen Dodo, who also worked there, slipped and messed something up. The manager came out of the staff room and began to yell at her. She asked for forgiveness for her mistake, but the manager was a creep, threatening to fire her. When the girl offered to pay for the damages, he cut her salary in half as his compensation and ordered her to come to his office later. Lin watched the whole scene unfold, but the manager also shouted at him to work properly. As the manager went back into his office, Queen expressed regrets to Lin. He didn't mind the situation, stating that they were both the poorest in the college and that they should help each other. She invited Lin to dinner after she met with the manager, since she had a half-price coupon. Lin considered her an angel. However, when Queen entered the manager's room, he closed the door with a creepy smile. She apologized to him, promising to work hard in the future, but the manager's intentions were dirty, and he advanced towards her. Suddenly, Lin arrived and summoned a heavy machine on the manager's head, causing him to fall to the ground. The manager became furious and threatened to fire Lin, but Lin remained calm and controlled as he reminded him who the real king was. He revealed that he couldn't fire Lin. Instead, Lin would fire him. The manager was shocked to hear this, but he was still not convinced. Lin grabbed Queen's hand and asked the manager to confirm and leave the room. As they tried to exit, the manager suddenly called the owner to confirm the news while Lin and Queen watched him. Lin entered the manager's office and locked the door. He asked the manager to greet his new boss, but the manager remained quiet. Suddenly, the manager threw a clock at Lin, but fortunately, Lin dodged it. The manager shouted that he had confirmed that Lin was not the owner, but Lin was shocked because he didn't want the manager to call the owner of the shop. As the manager got ready to call another person, Lin gave him a number to call and confirm. The manager warned Lin that if he didn't get a satisfying answer, he would send him to the police, but Lin remained calm as the manager called. Lin's phone rang, and he answered that he was Lin Tian. The manager got furious upon hearing this and grabbed a stool, trying to throw it at Lin. However, it vanished with Lin's trick. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard, and Lin smiled in his cool way. He revealed that he didn't buy the shop. Instead, he had bought the land with a swift below the roof of the store disappeared. We see Lin's bulldozer breaking down the store, and Lin jumping on one of his bulldozers to announce that the land belongs to his company's premise. This made everyone shocked. As Lin lay on a chair, he saw that the manager was weeping with defeat. With a smile on his face, Lin offered Queen a job as an architect for his company. She was speechless with gratitude, and Lin knew that he had found a true partner in his journey to success. Lin found that the mission with the hardest difficulty was just a bit fulfilled. Later, at the counselor's office, Miss Chan called in Lin as she found out that he was the one with whom she had signed the contract. Lin was not so surprised to hear this because his username was too simple to crack. Lin tried to call himself the boss, but Chan interrupted him, saying that the real boss is Lin's father. Lin was dumbstruck because Miss Chan was going the wrong way. She thought it was Lin's father's company in which she was employed. She thought Lin was a rich kid born with a silver spoon, but the reality was harsh for him as his father could not afford a silver spoon. She reminded him about his social score, which was too low, and he would not be able to graduate with that. He only got 1 point for helping old ladies skateboarding, as the country considered Lin as a rich kid from a wealthy family. She started giving him advice that he didn't have to worry about food. However, Lin was feeling hungry. She told him that he didn't have to worry about clothes, but he hadn't bought any undergarments for 2 years. She advised Lin not to worry about work, but the opposite was true as Lin had fired his boss a day before. She advised Lin to take part in social activities and engage with people to earn a higher score. Lin stopped her by holding Chan's hand, informing that he found a construction site where he would work and get an internship. Miss Chan blushed with his action and wished him good luck for his new job. As Lin was leaving for work, Zhang overheard their conversation and realized that Lin will not graduate if his score remains low. He smiled as something was cooking in his mind. He immediately called his dad and urged him for money. However, at Changdaha Hotel, Zhang's dad, Mr. Zhang, hung up his phone and was looking at another person in the office named Diff and Pai. He asked Mr. Zhang to give money to his son. Mr. Zhang pretended to be cool and said that he will transfer the money. But Diff and Pai interrupted him, saying that his funds are frozen, and he can't use any money. Mr. Zhang started sweating bullets as an outsider knew about his secret. Diff also knew that Mr. Zhang got divorced with his wife and she took all his money. Mr. Zhang was shaking with fear and shouted, asking how Davy knew his secret. He asked Jiang to accept his proposal, or he would do something bad to Mr. Zhang's hotel. He left his visiting card for Zhang's dad. Later, Lin was working on his own construction site when he found that moving bricks was too relaxing for him. Suddenly, Queen Duoduo called every worker for lunch. Lin stood in the queue and waited for his turn, hoping that the lunchbox would be full of chicken legs. When his turn came, Queen handed him the lunchbox, and Lin was waiting joyfully for it, but someone took it off. It was a tall, muscular man. Lin asked him why he was not in line, but that man shut him up. Queen tried to interfere, but that man started misbehaving with her. This made Lin furious, and he was going to beat that person, but someone stopped him. There was a boy warning Lin not to mess up with that guy. Lin questioned that man's identity, and the boy revealed that that man was a renowned gangster in that area. The gangster noticed Lin and the boy whispering, and he warned them that he would beat both of them. Suddenly, that gangster received some message on his phone, and he went away from there, threatening Lin to be punished when he came back. Lin found that man to be suspicious and decided to follow him, but the boy warned him that his salary would be deducted if he got caught. Lin calmed him down and revealed himself as the real boss. The boy was full of questions when Lin left. After some time, Lin reached the location following that guy. He found that the gangster was talking with a mystical personality named Shania, and they were planning something to ruin Lin's sight. He ran from there to save his sight, thinking of a plan. On the other side of the site, a group of gangsters were teasing a boy and Queen. That boy was trying to save Queen from the goons. They were beating him, and he was holding back, but a gangster was about to hit him with a spade. Queen and the boy were scared, but suddenly, with a loud noise, something broke the site cover and entered the site. It was Lin, our hero, with his bus, and he was about to hit the gangsters, saying that he didn't know if it would be painful to be hit by a bus. In his way, one of the gangsters was holding on in front of Lin's bus. Lin asked him if he was one of the gangsters causing trouble at the site. The man responded by threatening Lin about his boss, but Lin was fearless as always. He took a step forward with determination, clutching his spade in his hand. Suddenly, his sound interrupted their tense confrontation. The muscular man announced his appearance on the scene. The two men stared at each other for a moment, and then Lin recognized the newcomer as one of the Shana gangsters who had previously tried to bully him. Shania started shivering, instinctively covering his vital parts. Lin showed Shania the spade he had brought, but the muscular man became enraged and eager to attack Lin. Lin realized that he must be a follower of Shania, and he agreed to fight him. However, before they could engage in combat, someone struck the follower on the back of his head as he turned around in anger. The muscular man was shocked to see an old lady standing there. He started sweating profusely, realizing that she was his mother. She grabbed his ear and began to beat him while shouting at him. He started crying, and his mom turned to Lin, thanking him for being the person who brought her there. Lin took pleasure in considering himself a gentleman as the lady left. Lin asked Shania to talk, and Shania started sweating, saying someone paid him to do this, but he would leave now. Lin stopped him, demanding a favor. He wanted to know the name of the person who employed Shania for this job. Shania hesitated to tell the name of his employer because it was against their rules, but Lin knew the price to break the rules. He offered him a bag of money, and when Shania showed laziness, Lin gave him 2 more bags of money. This action made Shania an ethical man, and he revealed that it was John who gave him the contract. Lin knew that this method would work because the gangster industry belongs to the service sector. He revealed to Shania that he's going to set up a big business, but he also shocked Shania by revealing something secret. Later, Cabula was in her office when Lin entered, getting her ready for something. She was declining, and Kyle couldn't believe that Lin wanted her to entertain his guest. She shouted, calling him bad as she didn't expect this from him, but Lin was serious and left the room, reminding her about the bad consequences of disobeying him. In frustration, she threw her shoes towards Lin, but he left, recalling the time and place. Kyle called her assistant, Gotaro, and ordered him to ask for help from Dad, but Gotaro declined because he believed that Dad wasn't the right person. Cash shouted at Gotaro on the road, telling him that Dad was the only person who wasn't tempted by money. But Gotaro requested her to think about it once again, reasoning that Dia would be more harmful than Lin. Kyle finally made up her mind and pointed her feet on Gotaro's bald head, which made him feel nice. She left with anger, ordering him to arrange a meeting with Dad in 1 hour. An hour later, at a cafe, Dad and Kyle greeted each other. Kyle asked him about his fame, and Dad replied that all of his fans just respected him. Kyle tried to reveal her problem, but Dad made her keep silent. He had a special power by which he could see anyone's secret and owed that to his clients. He used his power on Kyle and found out that she had lost her parents. When everyone tried to bully her, she fought back and ruled the gangsters. When Dad told this to Kyle, she was shocked as it was her secret. Now Odin won. Kyle was still confused that Dad was going to help her, but Dad confirmed that he would help her deal with Lin, and other people like Jiang had also reached out to him and wanted to deal with Lin together according to their plan. Kyle arrived at the location where Lin had requested her to be at the given time. It was a night that she couldn't have imagined that she would entertain his guests. She dismissed the thought and believed that Dee would ruin Lin's plan. So she informed Dad that she had taken her position on call while Dad and Jiang were standing outside the same hotel. Dad instructed Jiang to keep an eye on Lin for a while, and he complied by going after him. Lin also arrived at the hotel and walked forward to enter, where Jiang suddenly bumped into him and acted surprised to see Lin there. Lin recognized him as someone important. Jiang asked Lin if he wanted to eat in the restaurant, but Lin rejected the offer and started walking into the hotel. Chang stopped him again, which annoyed Lin. He asked Lin if he knew that the hotel belonged to his family, and they could arrange special food for him. However, Lin wasn't interested in that and walked inside. Jiang yelled that Lin was breaking the rules, which drew everyone's attention. Lin asked Jiang which rule he was breaking. Jiang accused Lin of hiring an actress to entertain his guests physically in a private room of the hotel. Lin demanded evidence, and Jiang walked towards the room, claiming that he knew about Lin's plan. But when Jiang opened the door, he was stunned to see kids playing with Cabuleo. Lin asked Jiang about the dinner if he was disappointed to see kids there. He replied with what he was expecting as Jiang left disappointed. Lin told Caballero that she was the perfect host for kids. She had no idea that it was Lin's plan. Meanwhile, Day watched all these happenings and grew increasingly furious. He couldn't get a read on Lin, and it felt like he was trying to decipher binary numbers. After that, Lin and Kyle left the hotel, and Lin opened himself up to accept an apology from Kyle. She was shamefaced and regretful for her mistake. Lin was disappointed to know that Kyle thought he would use her for gross things. Kyle reminded him that he did not clear the situation before. Lin thought he had won Kyle's trust and planned to use her for business purposes. As they both headed towards Lin's bus, he was lost in thought about his mission when suddenly he bumped into a man. It was Day. They both regretted it and went their separate ways. Lin headed towards his bus, and Day decided to scan him up close. He couldn't find anything special, but he noticed a number on his body that was at 12%. Day was impressed with Lin because he couldn't gather information by scanning him. John asked Day about his next step, but Day was planning something big. He decided to target Lin's close associates. Later at Miss Chan's office, she received a call from the doctor. She asked about her father's health, but what she heard was horrible. She was stunned, just like Queen Dudu. Dudu was at home when she got a call from her landlord. Even Kavana called at her office, and when she picked up, she too was stunned. She agreed to something with the caller, and became tense about Lin's safety. Back at Lin's office, he was very tense because none of his employees were answering his calls, and they had resigned without notice. His mission completion percentage had decreased, and only 3% was left. Suddenly, he received a phone call notifying him of a car race that night, and he was given a new mission to win the race as a follow-up mission, but he had to use his bus for the race. Suddenly, there was a knock on Lin's door. He went to open it, and found Day there for a job interview. Day introduced himself as Long, and Lin welcomed him. He remembered that he had posted a recruitment ad. To his surprise, the numbers had changed to 3%, but Day had something bad waiting for Lin in the race. Later that night, all the racers gathered for the race. Lin was also there with his bus. The race was longer than the previous one, as the racers had to go to the east point of the city, register themselves, and then rush to the west part of the city. Lin was chilled out that there were no consequences of losing the race, but he would be rewarded if he won. The referee announced the prize for the winner, which was a membership in a miracle club, but he also announced a punishment for the loser, which was to hand over their most valuable property papers. This made Lin stunned because he didn't have any clue about the punishment. However, Lin believed that his new partner Day would not disappoint him. Day was on the driver's seat, despite wanting Lin to lose. As the race started, Suksuking was leading the pack, defending her title. The commentator was praising Suksuking, and she told everyone that she lost to a mysterious man in a trial race, and his car was modified by their club. However, we all know that it was Lin who defeated her with his bus. Something drew her attention. It was Lin's bus, which was last among all the racers. Believing in a hare and tortoise strategy, Dad reminded Lin about the speed of the bus, which was too low, but it was as he had his strategy. He picked up his phone and dialed the police, but he didn't get any reply. He was shocked that there was no network. It was Day's plan to jam the network of the whole city for that night. Lin thought for a while to initiate his alternative super acceleration plan. He ordered Day to change routes, but Day asked him as it was not the right way. But Lin was ready to detour at the registration points. Some racers completed the registration seal and went away. Jiang also reached there. He was happy as Lin still had not reached there. But when he took his hand out of the car to take the seal, he was shocked because it was a snowfall, but the season was summer. He heard a horn, and when he turned, he was stunned as it was airplanes causing the snowfall, and Lin's bus was snowboarding on it at full speed. It was Lin's plan to accelerate his bus. Lin was enjoying the sight of other cars slipping on the icy road, colliding with each other in a chaotic dance. Jiang, his rival, had also lost control of his vehicle and was now crying in defeat when he headed up to find some plane causing snowfall. But Lin had arranged artificial snowfall, and it was the reason for his detouring. Dad disclosed that Lin took a detour to the south on his way to the airport, where he convinced the authorities to make it snow with an exorbitant amount of money. He also approached a mechanical workshop and persuaded them to upgrade his bus specifically for the snowy conditions. Day was surprised at Lin's extravagant spending to create the snowfall. Day informed Lin that the airplane had already used up all the snow, and they couldn't use any more to accelerate. He suggested that Lin bribe the referee because he was planning Lin to be disqualified, but Lin refused to resort to unethical tactics. Despite his warnings, Lin remained steadfast in his plan and ordered him to head north. Day reminded him of the risks, but Lin's unwavering confidence silenced him. After a brief silence, Lin asked Dad to focus on his job, and they continued on their journey northward. As the commentators eagerly waited for the winner to cross the finish line, the first tier of racers was still several kilometers away. But something was amiss. Sue was nowhere in sight. Unbeknownst to them, Sue sensed that her rival, Lin, would stop at nothing to win the race. So she hung back, fallen closely behind a group of racers to avoid any traps he may have laid. When the opportunity presented itself, she put her foot down and accelerated past the others, taking the lead. Her fans cheered her on, but their celebration was short-lived. Suddenly, a loud noise rang out, grabbing everyone's attention. As they looked on in shock, Sue slammed on the brakes, realizing that a high-speed rail had unexpectedly appeared on the course, disrupting the race. It was not yet time for the scheduled train, leading Sue to suspect that Lin engineered the delay to slow her down. Despite the setback, Sue remained determined to hold on to her lead. However, her confidence was shattered when another sound shattered the air. It was Lin calling Sue her girlfriend, and Lin's bus being towed on the train, hurtling towards the finish line in the end. Lin crossed the finish line first and claimed victory, leaving Sue to rue her missed opportunity. The audience was jubilant, celebrating Lin's victory, while Sue watched with embarrassment. Day approached her and asked about the conflict between her and Lin, but Sue declined to reveal anything. In question, why Day, who had divine eyes capable of seeing through anything, couldn't deal with the situation. Day admitted that Lin was the only person he couldn't see through. Upon scanning Lin again, he found that his number had been changed to 37. Lin then arrived and praised Day for his hard work, but Sue shouted at him when she realized that the audience had been called by Lin to be introduced to his new employees, all of whom he had hired to fulfill his mission. After Lin and Day left, Sue disclosed that he was going to resign the employees of his company. However, Doe didn't respond, but they said this made Lin doubt his decision. Day then recognized his mistake and admitted that as he had just joined, he was not familiar with Lin's company's conditions. He reassured Lin that they would still be happy for his victory. Lin brushed it off and stated that he just needed to give them more money as they boarded the bus. Lin realized that Day was not the simple guy, just as Day was contemplating the same about Lin when they left with the bus. Sue was furious that Day failed to deal with Lin. She struck her hand on her bike, which shattered into pieces, but a blue aura emanated from her hand, and she decided to deal with Lin on her own. However, Lin reached Ka's office. When he entered, he was surprised to see Kyle and Joe, a police officer, arguing about something. Joe intended to arrest Ka, and when Lin interrupted them, they both started blaming Lin for his involvement in the case. Lin found a wasteful difference between them when matters a lot. Lin stopped them from yelling and asked for another reason for their debate. They both started telling him at the same time, but Lin couldn't understand anything. Lin silenced Kyle, and she quit without her wish. Lin greeted Joe and asked her to take a seat and explain things. She stated that all the trouble started in the morning on a live streaming platform where Copper formed a live stream. The platform asked the viewers to top up and get 50 times the returns. Lin thought he lost a golden opportunity, but as viewers topped up their accounts, they got frozen. The owners and shareholders of the company disappeared, and Lin was curious about what happened to the money. Sadly, the only person found from the company was Caballero, although she held a small amount of shares. Lin stood up as it was time to catch the escapees. Day was waiting for them near the bus as they exited Caballero's office. Kyle asked Lin about the live streaming platform, and he replied that he had suspected it earlier, so he had asked his people to keep an eye on public transport and airports. Silly informed them that many people were trying to hide their identities and escape from the city. One of their suspects was Lai Sanction, a small investor and shareholder of Rooster Live who had stolen money from viewers and escaped. Lin asked Silly about the investigation on him. She was good at her job and had already done it. She informed Lin that Lai was going to take part in a gaming event that night. Lin smiled and jumped on his bus, feeling confident because, according to him, playing games is just like spending money, and he was damn good at it. As everyone got on the bus, Lin stepped out at the door and declined his offer to come with them. That wanted to drive for Lin, but Lin rejected the proposal as Silly was back. He asked Day to arrest as he was going to perform in the race, but Day was eager to come with Lin and was ready to do anything to ruin his plan. Lin thought for a while, but then he suddenly closed the door on Day's face. Day stood there speechless as Lin left. Colin informed Lin about this questionable character. Lin asked Kyle about Day's involvement in the Rooster Live case, but Kyle wasn't sure. Our hero, Lin, had hired Day on purpose, knowing his identity so that Day couldn't play tricks on him. Meanwhile, at Lai Sanction's office, who's playing the game, killer of other characters, he had made it to the top of the player rankings, and he thought that no other player would challenge him since he had heroic level armor. However, a new challenger emerged. It was Lin unarmed. Lai thought Lin was a noob and attacked him with a special attack, but something strange happened on his screen as his character fainted and lost to Lin. Lin was teasing him and calling him a loser, which made Lai full of rage. He started breaking things, unable to believe that anyone could defeat him without any equipment, even though he had top armor. He shouted at Lin, accusing him of cheating, but Lin was still teasing him, flexing his invisible armor. This made Lai shocked as Lin was wearing the rarest SSS level bundle in the game, which was also the most expensive. Lai was depressed that he was no longer the number one player of the game. Lai wondered whether he should use the money he had received while Lin was teasing him that there was no rival to him, hardening his heart. Lin picked up the card and put in money to buy legendary armor. He bought 1,000 crates and started opening 10 of them at once. He didn't get anything until the 10th draw, where he finally got a gold armor. He thought it was a good start, but when he opened his other crates again and again, he got nothing. He made unlimited draws but found nothing. He wiped out all of his money and was not able to continue. He was weeping for it. Suddenly, he got an in-game message. When he checked it, it was from Lin trying to sell his legendary armor to Lai. He replied, saying that even if he gathered all his money, it still would not be enough for him to buy it. Lin replied that he didn't need any money, he just needed friends. Then there was a satisfactory smile on Lai's face as Lin gifted him that armor. After that, at Lin's office, he took a deep breath as he did what he planned. But Ka was feeling sad as Lin lost such a rare item for her. Lin reminded her that nothing was rare for him. He had a bunch of legendary armor. This left Kyle with her mouth wide open. Lin also revealed that he bought that game company too, which shocked them both.